welcome back to the NCCDP YouTube channel. I'm your host, Alexandria, and today we are going to be talking about dementia stigma with the lovely Kari Johnson. Welcome back, Kari.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Of course. So, to get right into it, what is dementia stigma?
Dementia stigma is, classifying people with dementia as being a certain way or expecting that they're going to act a certain way. So stereotypes, there can be discrimination, fear, misinformation. There's a lot of that. And just generally, I wouldn't say ignorance, but just lack of knowledge and lack of interest to pursue the knowledge. Thinking that, my parent doesn't have dementia, so it doesn't matter to me. So it can be something as simple as just assuming, this person has dementia, so there's nothing that they can offer me. And it can be all the way up to discrimination, where they're not allowed to participate in a church service, or they're not allowed to participate or go to the grocery store because maybe they made a mess the last time, something where they're restricted from doing something because they have dementia.
Someone once said, once an adult, twice a child. What does that mean for someone who's caring for a patient with dementia?
That they don't know what they're doing because it's ridiculous. They may have the needs of a child, such as requiring assistance with eating, toileting, etc. But these are individuals that raised us and have life histories. We are here because of them. They were our teachers. They were our bosses. They were our neighbors. I wouldn't say that growing in the uterus was a walk in the park probably in those last couple of months, but comparing it to dementia, that is tough, and tough for years. And so what a baby goes through is much different than what a person with dementia goes through. So I guess that when people say that comment to me, it's disrespectful because we're not recognizing what this person has offered the world.
So how do those assumptions about people's capabilities affect those with dementia?
There's a lot of shame, and there can be masking of symptoms where, if someone feels like they might be developing dementia, they might mask it, which means trying to hide it, because they assume that their choice and freedom will be taken away. And that's a big fear for people. That's a fear even, I think, for my own parent, my mom, who doesn't have dementia. She's consistently telling us lately the high-level cognitive complex tasks that she's doing to I think, reassure my sister and I that she doesn't have dementia. And for my dad, he would say, I don't understand what's going on between my ears. And he called me one time and said, you're just not going to stop until I'm incarcerated. I don't know what that was about. I guess he thought he was going to have to go to a nursing home. And he didn't hang up the phone all the way. And he said, Bert, you got to get it together or these people are going to lock you up. And it was just like, oh. And so I guess, that's how some of the stigma affects people and even their perception of themselves. And then for him, that grieving process of, I guess this is what it is. So he looked at me and said, can I make it better, Care? I said, in your case, Dad, yeah. And he said, is it the drinking? And I said, I don't know, it doesn't matter. So I think it affects, stigma, it impacts people in a societal way, but also a personal way if you don't have it, and a personal way if you do have it.
Yeah. Wow. And then you mentioned fear and misinformation earlier. What impact do fear and misinformation have?
People don't realize that an early diagnosis is beneficial. They don't know that some of the symptoms can be treated, and not necessarily medically, but with adaptations to a routine, etc. Also, not knowing what services are out there. I saw my dentist a few weeks back, and he said, well, my dad has early onset, or what some people call young onset Alzheimer's. And I said, oh, really? How old is he? And he said, 93. Oh, I said, well, how long has he had it? Oh, a couple of years. I said, oh, really? Okay. Typically young onset, some sources say 60, others say 65 years and older. But he didn't realize that, the Alzheimer's Association is now looking at biomarkers. So with my numb mouth and drooling, I'm telling him, I'm like, you should go and at the end of the conversation, he was like, I think I should go get screened. And I was like, I think you should too. I think that's a good idea. So it's like I'm even educating when I can't, I'm drooling. And I mean, he was asking the questions while he was working on me. So I thought, well, I'm going to try and answer.
Why do you always do that? It's not a good time to talk.
Yeah, no, I know. Lord knows. Who knows if I sent him to the right place? Yeah. I don't know.
You did what you could with the circumstances.
Yeah. I just thought that's just so common though. People don't know that there's different types of dementia. They don't know that that they affect different parts of the brain. And the importance of that is that it impacts how you can communicate with them or how that you behave around them. If the frontal lobe is impaired, they may try and take their clothes off in public. If another area is affected, it may be more speech. And so there's ways to communicate with people with dementia and they're missed. So that person goes to a point of isolation because we as a society don't know how to interact.
So how do we as a society address stigma? How do we address learning more? How do we go about kind of improving this issue?
Well, maybe I'll go to all the dentists and screen them and ask if they have, I don't know. We need to educate gently. I don't like to offend people if they've said the wrong thing. We need to educate. And one of the interesting things, people can look this up, is called the Restaurant of Mistaken Orders. It's in Japan, and all of the staff there have dementia. And so everyone that eats there knows that if you go in and you order something, that may not be what you get, but you do not complain. You eat what you are given because it's the Restaurant of Mistaken Orders. Also, in some other countries, their cashiers have been educated about dementia. And so they're able to assist and identify when someone needs that assistance. We're a long way off from that.
Yeah,
I wouldn't say that we're like last compared to other countries in dementia care, but we're not first. So I think one of the main things is education. Also demonstration. For those of us that work in healthcare, utilizing good skills and showing the family how to use those at home.
How would someone in their day-to-day life go about maybe educating themselves? Or should they look towards programs? How do they go about?
Well, each type of dementia typically has its own association center, so you can go online. I just had a seminar a couple of days ago, and someone's partner has dementia, has Alzheimer's disease, and she went and bought all the books, looked at everything. And so, really I think the best is to look online as a starting point. And then depending on what the situation is, if they have a family member, maybe trying to find a support group for themselves, talking amongst their friends about it, being open to talking about it, because in some way everybody's been touched by dementia for the most part.
This is kind of touching a little bit on what you mentioned earlier, but I'm just thinking about how there is such kind of a fear of even just trying to learn more because of saying the wrong thing, being ignorant, or messing it up, or because even I just talked with you just one-on-one, and I'm like, I have a question and I don't know how to say it, and if I say it wrong, I'm sorry. And I just because it's it's a good thing that everyone wants to be respectful, but also they don't know how to go about actually.
Well, and I think that's just how you preface it if you have a question, exactly how you did. You were like, I'm not sure if this is the right way. Be comfortable to ask those questions. And I think us as, those that work in healthcare have to provide that environment where people feel safe to do that. And then other people have to do what I do and talk about some of the hard things that they've dealt with their own parents. It's not hard for me to talk about it, but I do share very personal things when I teach or, during interviews, etc. Because how are others going to know what to do if I don't?
I think the more it's talked about, the easier it is to feel comfortable to like reach out, ask questions, look up
Absolutely.
resources and everything. Well, before we wrap it up, is there anything else specifically that you'd like to talk about within dementia stigma? I don't want to forget anything. If I'm like, okay, we're done, and you're like, wait.
No, yeah. I think we've covered it. I mean, I think we just have to think about labels and not labeling people, as difficult or being demented or stupid. I had one client, and he was a bricklayer, and he had recently moved into a facility and was kind of out of sorts. So I took him outside to the garden. I said, I need an assessment on these bricks. And he was like, well, they're a mess. And he said, yeah. I said, but it's not my area of expertise. He's like, well, if you get some guys down here, I'll tell them what to do. And I said, you're really smart. He said, yeah, I can't remember what happened 10 minutes ago, but I can remember bricklaying because that was long before that. So I think it's, just important, as I talked about earlier, knowing who that person is and helping them stay themselves, helping to pull that out, rather than just assuming, well, he has dementia, he isn't going to know. They are capable of a lot more than people give them credit for. So I think that's the number one thing to keep in mind.
Always comes back to those assumptions.
Absolutely.
And thinking, what it looks like, what dementia looks like, what it is, as if it's always this black and white thing, but it's
not. Even the diagnosis itself is not, because the most accurate diagnosis at this point is upon autopsy. So with that, we're trying to inform ourselves, but yet the science isn't quite there yet. And you can have more than one type, just to add more complexity to it.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
You could have more than one type?
Oh, absolutely. And there's certain proteins in the brain that, like a TDP43 protein, that can be present with Alzheimer's, but also frontotemporal dementia. So there's a lot of going on now at looking at proteins and finding that people have maybe 2-3 different types going on here and changes in the brain. So I don't know where that will lead, because then it starts to get a little bit muddy. But I don't know. I guess at the end of the day, regardless of the diagnosis, the most important part, yet again, is to treat them like a person.
It's crazy that we forget that.
Yeah. It's not easy work. There can be agitation. There can be strong emotions, because they're having a hard time understanding the world around them. And so I think we focus on that and forget that there's a person there. It's, they've caused a problem in my day. They've slowed me down. I wasn't able to get this and this done. And so that's where some of that negative stuff comes from. When in actuality, if you knew them well enough, you can get stuff done if you set up the right environment for them.
It's really frustrating how many limitations people put on people with dementia. And I can understand it can be frustrating or complicated or confusing, but I feel like having putting those limitations on them only holds everyone back.
Absolutely.
And the whole community, if you will.
It does. And for family who are having a difficult time watching their loved one go through this, to suddenly see them at some point participating in something that they didn't think that they could, that not only benefits that client, that person with the dementia, but it also provides comfort and understanding for the family and education of oh, okay, well, when we come and visit, we don't need to just sit here awkwardly. We can actually do an activity together, or, because a lot of times visits are missed. Someone's been labeled as being difficult, and a family wants to visit, and maybe a care partner says to them, well, they're having, they're angry today, or they're having dementia behaviors today. And then they don't go and they don't see the person. And now you've missed out on that opportunity, which could have been a joyful opportunity.
Yeah. You mentioned how people will have their awkward little visits. Do you think because of whether it's the assumptions of their own or with the care partners, do you think I had the wording of this question and then it just left my brain.
It's related to stigma.
Yes. You knew where I was going.
I did. Yeah.
That's
yeah.
what matters.
Mm-hmm. I knew where you were going. Yeah, it absolutely relates to that, because it's that misinformation, the stereotypes. You know, they're a baby now, so we're going to talk to them like a baby. You know, you go to visit your mom and you're going to talk to her like she's the child, and then she's irritated, and then you have to leave because no one taught you how to communicate with someone with dementia.
Do you think people, because of like all of those things, the assumptions and everything, do you think they like not forget, but like forget like this is still the same person?
Yeah.
That they were before.
Yeah, they do. And the thing is that they forget what's just happened, but their long-term memory, for the most part, stays intact for a very long time. So you can sit and visit about something that happened 50 years ago, or you could sit and listen to someone talk about their daughter as a child, and you're the adult daughter sitting next to her, but she doesn't recognize you. And rather than being upset about that, understanding that the disease has taken away that ability to remember who you are in present day. It's not a choice.
Yeah.
Your parent isn't choosing this, but they're sitting there telling you how much they love their child, which is you. Facilitating those moments of joy is so important because it helps destigmatize dementia. We want to facilitate moments of joy. It's scary for them. So,
well, thank you for talking about dementia stigma with us,
You're
educating us a little bit, and hopefully you all were able to gather something from this and find resources for yourself to educate yourself or others around you. If you'd like to learn more, our website is always linked in the description. And as always, if there's any specific topic you'd like us to cover, let us know. We want to hear from you. Thanks for watching, and we will see you next time.